Boys are better at math than girls.
That is not true. I do not believe that. I believe in perfect gender equality. Girls are equal to boys at everything, except in the many cases when girls are better than boys.
But boys score much higher on standardized math tests, like the SAT math test.
I do not believe that. The Janet Hyde and other professors at the University of Wisconsin tell us that there just are not gender differences in math performance anymore. So parents and teachers need to revise their thoughts about this issue. Gender stereotypes are very resistant to change. You need to change. And so do you.
But boys scored much higher on average than girls on the 2010 math SAT test.
I do not believe that. That may have been true in the past, but things have changed. Today girls are just as good as boys in math.
It is a fact. The average score this year for high school boys taking the SAT math test was 534 points. The average score for girls was 500 points. That's a difference of 44 points. Wait, let me check my math. I usually need to use a calculator. Sorry, it is a difference of 34 points.
Even if it is true, that is only 1 year. What about last year?
Boys scored higher by 35 points in 2009.
What about 10 years ago?
Boys scored 35 points higher in 2000.
What about in the 1980s?
Boys scored higher in every year during that decade.
Okay, what about the 1970s?
Boys have scored higher by 30 points or more in every year, since at least 1972. The gap favoring boys has been remarkably constant over time.
But the Janet Hyde says that more girls than boys take the SAT, because more girls than boys are going to college. That is the explanation for gender differences on the math SAT test, not that boys are better at math than girls.
Yes, that is true. More girls take the SAT test now than boys, because so many more girls than boys go to college. In fact, that means there are significant gender inequalities in favor of girls for high school students taking the SAT test and high school students going to college. Aren't those gender imbalances in favor of girls a problem?
I told you before that the gender activists like the American Association of University Women and the Janet Hyde want perfect gender equality for everything, except when girls are superior to boys, like going to college and getting college degrees. Women get far more college degrees than men, and the college degree gap in favor of women is expected to increase in the future. Women completely dominate higher education now, and get more degrees than men at every level, and in most fields. That is true girl power.
What about the fields of engineering, math and computer science?
Women are discriminated against in those fields.
Maybe boys are smarter at math, and they naturally gravitate to engineering, computer science, and mathematics. Remember that boys have higher SAT scores on the math test by 34 points.
The Janet Hyde and her colleagues explain the huge, statistically significant difference in SAT math test scores as the sampling artifact.
The sampling what?
The sampling artifact.
What does the sampling artifact mean?
Like I told you before, more girls than boys take the SAT test, so the average test score for girls is lower, because we are dipping down lower into the female distribution of talent.
Does that mean that the increased number of girls taking the test includes many girls who score below average on the SAT math test?
Yes, that is what the sampling artifact means.
If the increased number of girls taking the SAT is the explanation for lower math test scores, and if the number of girls taking the test keeps increasing over time, shouldn't the average math test scores for girls be falling over time?
Yes, that is what the sampling artifact means.
And if the number of girls taking the SAT relative to boys increases over time, then shouldn't the gap between male and female math test scores be getting bigger over time?
Yes, I think you understand the sampling artifact now.
But the average math test scores for girls has gone up over time, not down. And the gap between male and female test scores has not gotten bigger over time. It is about the same now as it was in 1972, when the Richard Nixon was president.
But I still think the term the sampling artifact sounds scholarly and academic, so it must be the reason that girls score 34 points lower on the SAT math test than boys.
Let's talk about gender differences for students getting perfect scores on the SAT test.
the gender activists and the AAUW tell us that perfect equality between the sexes is the ultimate goal, and any gender differences are the result of gender discrimination. And that requires government intervention, government regulations, or massive subsidies for women to penetrate male-dominated fields like science, technology, engineering and math. Except when women outnumber men. Like when women get 143 college degrees for every 100 men, and when women get 60% of all master's degrees. And when 77% of veterinarians are women, and when 79% of graduate students in health sciences are women. Those outcomes are natural and expected because women are superior to men in most academic fields.
That sounds like a selective concern for gender imbalances. Don't those imbalances in favor of women require government intervention or massive subsidies for men to penetrate those female-dominated fields and professions, and for more men to get college degrees to achieve gender parity and close the college degree gap in favor of women?
No, a selective concern for gender imbalances is justified today because of historical discrimination against women, and the fact that women were underserved in the past. And the Janet Hyde tells us that there are no gender differences anymore in math performance.
But on the 2010 Math SAT test, more than 8,000 boys got perfect scores and fewer than 4,000 girls got perfect scores. If my math is correct, that is a ratio of more than 2 boys to 1 girl. Boys must be better at math, at least at very high levels of academic achievement. Maybe there are significant gender differences in math performance after all.
Yes, but that is just for perfect scores of 800. What about for other scores?
Boys outnumber girls for all scores on the SAT math test between 580 and 800.
Well, maybe that is because of the sampling artifact.
The sampling artifact would only affect average test scores, and would not affect test scores at the extreme high end.
Well, then if the sampling artifact does not explain the outcome, that boys outperform girls on the SAT math test, then the gender disparity must be, because the SAT test is biased against girls.
But more girls than boys got perfect scores on both the SAT critical reading test and the SAT writing test in 2010.
Those parts of the SAT test must not be biased if girls outperform boys. It is only the SAT math test that is biased. The Janet Hyde says that there are no gender differences in math performance anymore, so test differences can only be explained by gender bias, if not by the sampling artifact.
Maybe boys are better at math, and girls are better at reading and writing. That is what the SAT test results show.
That does not fit the gender activist agenda. They believe in gender equality, and perfect statistical gender parity is the ultimate goal. Except when gender differences favor women.
But aren't boys better at math than girls?
No, that is the sampling artifact. If not the sampling artifact, the SAT test must be biased.
Except for the SAT reading test and the SAT writing test.
Yes, that is correct.
The
end.